The Alpha's last gamble. The battlefield was a ruin of smoke and fire. Explosions echoed across the scarred plains as the Korath warriors fell one by one, their howls lost beneath the roar of laser artillery. At the center of the chaos stood the Alpha, towering and scarred, his silver-furred frame riddled with scratches and burns. His clan was collapsing. Every instinct screamed for him to fight, but he knew this battle was already lost. His cubs, barely old enough to stand, were huddled behind a shattered warpod. Their wide eyes reflected terror and confusion, uncomprehending of the carnage around them. The Alpha's jaw tightened. There was only one chance to save them. One desperate gamble that might, against all odds, give them a future. He had made a pact long ago with a human, John Hale, a man who had saved him during a skirmish on the border colonies. A human alone, aged and weary, living in the quiet isolation of his ranch. The Alpha had never trusted humans fully, yet John had something the rest lacked: patience, cunning, and an unshakable morality that could shape even the fiercest of Korath younglings. "Listen well, my cubs," he growled, his voice low and firm. "You will leave with a human. Obey him. Learn from him. Survive. You will return stronger than any of them ever imagined." The cubs blinked, fear and uncertainty battling in their gaze. One of them, the smallest, whispered, "But father, you—" "I will not return," he admitted, his voice breaking with the weight of inevitability. "This path is yours. Live through it. That is the only gift I can give you now." Carrying them carefully, the Alpha sprinted through the smoking battlefield, dodging plasma fire and collapsing debris. In the distance, a human shuttle waited, a relic from John's years on the fringes of space. Its engines hummed softly, a beacon of fragile hope. The Alpha placed the cubs inside, their small claws trembling against his fur. John Hale stood at the ramp, his broad shoulders silhouetted by the rising sun. For a moment, the Alpha hesitated, studying the human's steady, calm expression. This man had seen death countless times, yet here he was, waiting to take responsibility for the Alpha's most precious treasures. "Take them," the Alpha growled. "Teach them to survive. Keep them alive when I cannot." John inclined his head, silent but resolute. He had no illusions about the task. These were not ordinary children. These were the offspring of a warlord, fierce and untamed, and shaped by a culture of survival that valued strength above all else. Yet, something in their eyes stirred him, a glimmer of trust, and he accepted the charge. As the shuttle lifted, the Alpha's gaze lingered on the horizon. The war would consume him. He knew this. But if his cubs survived, if they learned what he could not teach them, the legacy of his clan might endure. He had gambled everything on a human's hand, and now there was no turning back. Inside the shuttle, the cubs pressed themselves close to John. The hum of the engines was a strange comfort, a lull between chaos and the unknown. The smallest cub whispered again, voice trembling, will he come back?" John placed a firm, reassuring hand on the cub's shoulder. "I don't know," he admitted honestly. "But I promise this, I'll make sure you survive. I'll teach you everything you need to know to face the world out there. And one day, you'll be stronger than you ever imagined." The cubs didn't fully understand, but the weight of John's words settled in their hearts. Survival, discipline, and trust. Strange concepts for alien cubs raised on the raw rules of strength, but necessary. In the human's care, they might yet become more than prey. Outside, the battlefield faded, replaced by the endless expanse of colonized space. Flames and screams receded behind them, leaving only the silent promise of a new beginning. The Alpha's gamble had been made. Now, survival rested entirely in human hands. And somewhere in the distance, the stars waited, patient and indifferent, ready to witness the unlikely legacy that would rise from their sacrifice. Raised by a human, the shuttle landed with a soft hiss on the edge of John Hale's isolated ranch, a patchwork of farmland and scrubland on the fringe of colonized space. The cubs tumbled out, their claws scratching at the earth, ears flicking nervously at the unfamiliar sounds of birds and wind. The smells were strange: damp soil, grass, and the faint tang of livestock. But for the first time since the battlefield, they felt something like safety. John studied them carefully. They were no longer the tiny, helpless creatures the Alpha had entrusted to him. Their limbs were strong, their eyes sharp, and their instincts still raw. But underneath the feral strength lay a malleable mind, one that could be guided or broken. First things first, John said, voice steady. You eat when you're told. You sleep when it's night. And you follow my instructions, not your instincts. Understood. The cubs exchanged glances, ears twitching. One finally stepped forward. We are warriors. We learn by fighting, by testing our limits. John nodded. And you'll still fight. But hey, you'll learn something your father could never teach you. Strategy, patience, and thinking beyond the next kill. That's what makes humans survive in this galaxy, and it's what I'll teach you. The days that followed were grueling. John rose before dawn, leading the cubs in drills that combined alien ferocity with human discipline. They learned to handle rifles, to set traps, to move silently across open ground. More importantly, John taught them to observe, to anticipate, to use cunning over brute force. At first, the cubs resisted. They would leap before looking, lash out at one another, even challenge John openly. Each failure was met with patience rather than punishment. When one cub snapped at John in frustration, he simply held up a hand. Strength isn't measured by claws or teeth. It's measured by control, by the choices you make when the easy option is to destroy. Slowly, the lesson sank in. The cubs began to combine their natural instincts with human reasoning. They learned to herd cattle with the precision of a general directing troops, to track animals without disturbing the environment, to plan hunts that maximized efficiency rather than sheer violence. John's methods were alien to them, yet effective. But the lessons were not only physical. John shared stories of human history, the wars, the alliances, the sacrifices. The cubs listened, fascinated and sometimes incredulous. They learned that power without compassion was hollow, that leadership was more than strength, and that survival often depended on protecting the weak rather than exploiting them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the cubs gathered around the fire. The smallest, who had been quietest since arrival, spoke first. You ask us to do things that seem strange. Why care for animals? Why spare enemies? John tossed a small log into the flames. Because in the end, life is precious. Strength is meaningless if it only destroys. And because sometimes, the world rewards those who think beyond the immediate fight. You are not just Korath cubs anymore. You are something new. Something stronger. Months turned into years. The cubs grew, their muscles thickening, their reflexes sharp, but now guided by human intellect and foresight. They hunted efficiently, trained relentlessly, and listened to John with growing respect. Occasionally, they would catch glimpses of the Alpha's teachings within themselves, a flash of feral cunning, a burst of raw aggression. But these were now tempered, directed, and focused. John watched them silently as they sparred one afternoon, moving with deadly precision, each anticipating the other's moves. Pride stirred in him, though he would never admit it aloud. They were no longer children. They were warriors, shaped by alien instinct, honed by human wisdom. And in that balance lay the seed of something extraordinary. For when the time came to face their father's enemies, they would not just fight. They would command, outthink, and outlast. They would become a force no one, not even the galaxy itself, could ignore. The cubs looked to John, not as a human guardian, but as a mentor, a second father. And he, in turn, saw in them a reflection of what humanity could inspire. Strength not just in body, but in mind and heart. The ranch was quiet again, the wind rustling through the grass. Yet beyond the horizon, the galaxy churned with danger. And when the time came, these cubs, raised by a human, would rise to meet it in ways neither their father nor the cosmos could have predicted. The return. Years had passed since the cubs had left the battlefield behind. Under John Hale's guidance, they had grown into formidable warriors, strong, disciplined, and cunning, but tempered by human wisdom. They were no longer children, nor were they merely the Alpha's heirs. They were something new, hybrids of alien ferocity and human ingenuity, ready to carve their own path in the galaxy. It began with whispers. Stories of distant clans oppressed by rival warlords, of enslaved Korath forced into endless labor, reached the cubs through old networks and scavengers. The blood of their father called to them, a primal roar demanding action. Yet, unlike their forebears, these cubs did not rush blindly into battle. They paused, strategized, and planned. They would not act as the alpha might have. They would act as humans had taught them, methodically, decisively, and with foresight. John had tried to dissuade them. "You've built a life here," he said, his hands gripping the railing of the farmhouse porch. "You're strong, yes, but vengeance will only consume you if you're not careful. Remember, power without discipline is death." One of the cubs, the tallest and most calculating, stepped forward. "We are not seeking vengeance alone. We seek to free them, to build something stronger than what our father left behind. We carry your teachings, mentor. We will not fail as he did." John studied them, seeing the fire in their eyes, the same fire he had nurtured over countless years of training. Finally, he nodded. "Then go. But remember this, fight smart. Fight with honor. And never forget the lessons that survival alone cannot teach." The cubs departed at dawn, their ship slicing silently through the thin atmosphere of the colony. Their first mission was small, a liberated band of enslaved Korath trapped in the mining belts of a distant system. The warlords guarding them were numerous, but complacent, confident in their dominance. The cubs approached under cover of night, using human-inspired tactics, distraction, stealth, and the careful placement of traps. The first skirmish was a revelation to the Korath who had remained under human influence. The cubs moved with precision, each anticipating the other's moves, coordinating strikes that combined feral strength with calculated strategy. When the smoke cleared, dozens of oppressors lay incapacitated or fleeing. The enslaved Korath, initially wary, now knelt before their liberators, astonished by the discipline and unity of the young warriors. Word spread quickly. The tales of the Alpha's children returned as saviors, but they were unlike any the galaxy had known. They did not merely slaughter the weak and seize power. They organized, trained, and inspired those they freed. Small groups swelled into dozens, dozens into hundreds, until a growing legion followed them. Human survivors, alien exiles, and even mercenaries joined, not out of fear, but out of trust in the cubs' vision. And the cubs led them with the patience and foresight of a human general, tempered by the raw courage of Korath blood. Battles that would have been disastrous under traditional leadership became decisive victories. They anticipated enemy maneuvers, protected their allies, and minimized unnecessary loss. One evening, after a hard-won confrontation with a rival warlord's fleet, the cubs gathered around a glowing holomap aboard their command ship. The youngest, who had always been the most skeptical of humans, traced a path across the territories they sought to liberate. "We could strike here," she suggested, pointing at a heavily fortified system. "It's risky." The eldest smiled. "Risk is manageable if we plan carefully. That's what John taught us. We don't just fight to survive. We fight to create something lasting. Every action must strengthen the legion, not weaken it." As they plotted, their legion spread across the stars, gathering strength, followers, and respect. From the ashes of oppression, they were building something new, a coalition not bound by blood alone, but by shared ideals and discipline. Humanity's influence, the patience, strategy, and foresight taught by John, had transformed them from abandoned cubs into leaders capable of commanding thousands. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of the galaxy, whispers began. The Alpha's cubs have returned. They are not children. They are commanders, shaped by a human hand, and their legion will not be denied. The cubs gazed out at the stars, remembering John's words. They were ready for the challenges ahead. The galaxy would soon learn that the Alpha's gamble and humanity's guidance had produced not merely warriors, but leaders who could reshape the very balance of power, commanding a legion of their own. The sun had barely risen over the jagged horizon of the contested system when the cubs, now fully grown, disciplined, and commanding, stood at the helm of their flagship. The Legion sprawled across nearby space, a coordinated fleet of alien vessels, human-designed ships, and independent raiders who had pledged allegiance not to fear, but to leadership and vision. For years, they had trained, liberated, and grown stronger, but now the final challenge awaited. The warlord who had enslaved their father's clan, a brute who ruled through terror and brutality. This was no ordinary battle. It was a test of everything they had learned under John Hale's guidance. The fusion of alien ferocity with human ingenuity. The eldest cub, now the tallest and most commanding, surveyed the formation. Remember, we strike with precision, not chaos. Focus on unity, not recklessness. Protect the weak, eliminate the threat, and preserve our people. The Legion moved as one. Their ships cut through space with disciplined coordination, sensors scanning for traps, enemy reinforcements, or weaknesses. When the warlord's fleet finally appeared, a vast armada of heavily armed vessels, the Cubs did not falter. They implemented strategies John had drilled into them for years: feints, diversions, and coordinated strikes that drew the enemy into carefully prepared kill zones. The first exchange was brutal. Explosions rocked the fleet, alien war cries and human shouts mingling in the comm channels. The Cubs fought not only with their ships but with their Korath-trained instincts, anticipating enemy maneuvers and striking with lethal efficiency. Unlike the warlord's forces, which relied on sheer size and fear, the Legion combined discipline, foresight, and loyalty. They were unstoppable. When the battle reached the warlord's flagship, the Cubs led a boarding team personally. They moved through corridors like shadows, silent, precise, and deadly. The warlord expected a chaotic assault. Instead, he found himself confronted by warriors who combined strength, intellect, and restraint. Every strike was measured, every move deliberate. The warlord's men fell one by one, unable to comprehend the seamless coordination of alien instinct honed by human discipline. Finally, the warlord himself faced the eldest cub. He roared, swinging a massive plasma blade, confident that brute strength would win the day. The cub sidestepped, countering with a precision strike that disarmed him instantly. "Strength is nothing without control," the cub said, echoing John's lessons. "Your tyranny ends now." With the warlord's defeat, the enslaved clans were freed. The Legion did not seek vengeance. They offered protection, guidance, and a new code. A council was formed, composed of former captives and liberated warriors, ensuring that power would be shared, not abused. Humanity's influence, discipline, compassion, foresight shaped the new order. From a distance, John Hale watched the culmination of years of effort. He had been brought aboard the flagship, old but steady, witnessing what his teachings had achieved. Tears welled in his eyes as he saw the cubs, no longer children, no longer merely heirs of an alpha, leading a legion that spanned species and systems. "They've done it," he whispered to himself. "They've become more than I ever imagined. My gamble, our lessons, they've created something lasting." The cubs gathered around John later, silent for a moment in respect. "We could not have done this without you," the eldest said. "Your guidance shaped us. You showed us that true strength is not only in body or blood, but in mind, heart, and the choices we make." John smiled, a faint, proud curve of his lips. "And you've proven that even abandoned cubs can become commanders of a legion. Not because you inherited it, but because you learned to lead and to protect. Humanity lives through you, not in imitation, but in influence." The galaxy would remember this moment. The Alpha's cubs, once left in human care to survive, had returned not just as warriors, but as leaders of a new order. They commanded with the ferocity of their heritage, the cunning of human instruction, and the unity of a legion bound not by fear, but by respect and shared purpose. As the stars stretched infinitely beyond the flagship's viewports, the cubs looked outward, knowing that challenges would come again. But now, they were ready. They were no longer children abandoned by fate. They were commanders, mentors, and protectors. The Alpha's gamble had succeeded. Humanity had shaped destiny, and in the quiet of space, the Legion's banner, carried by the cubs, rose high, a symbol of strength guided by wisdom, and a promise that no one, not even the galaxy, would ever underestimate them again.